Hey, gang, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we talk about the Beatles on all of our shows. We always have special guests that we welcome onto the program. And boy, do we have a special guest this time. He's a legendary singer and performer. He's had a long career in the music business. He was one of the biggest hit makers of the 70s.
Michael, Ken, can we try something? Something's on my screen. It's not. Jan,
I hear you.
forgive me. I can't see Kenny. I can't see you. You might as well stay here.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Everything behind you looks fine.
No, your face was just covered up.
Yeah, it covered a screen. We're good. Okay.
And the screen was covered on my end. So Jenny, my daughter, just came in to fix it. We're good now. Let's start again.
Okay, well, the thing is now I can't edit this.
Okay, so that's okay. So let me just share with you what happened. Everybody watching the show, this is a human thing. So I'm on a computer, which anybody at my age of, I'm coming up to 80, I'm 79 now. You know, and I know, we know nothing about punching a button that gets us off the screen. So poor Kenneth is doing this television interview with me, this video with me, and there was a big thing on his face. He's too cute to keep it there for the entire interview. Look at him rolling his eyes. So then Jenny came in, who does everything from, honey, do I do this? How do I do this on the phone? She comes in and she fixes it. Honey, how do we do this on the video? So everybody out there, this is the edit. We screwed it up and it's on my end. Go ahead, Ken. Go for it.
You're too kind about my being cute. You're the star here. Remember that.
No.
Yeah, so one of the biggest hit makers of the 70s, 3 #1 songs to your credit. So many great songs to talk about. Of course, I'm talking about...
Can I just stop you right there?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I saw the Billboard release and they said 3 #1 on Billboard. And this is no hit on Billboard. In the 70s, Billboard was the secondary magazine. The first secondary magazine that all of the record business went by was a magazine called Cashbox.
I know that.
And Cashbox, we had 5 #1 records.
Wow.
So you could take your choice, but because Billboard is now the king and queen of all of that, everybody goes by 3. But man, I'm going to say that we're very proud of having 5 million sellers. Some of them did 4 and 5 million records, like knocked 3 times.
Right.
And that was a lot of singles for those days, and even for today, more so for today than then. But there were 5 #1 singles, and boy, am I proud of that. So my apologies to Billboard, my thanks to Cashbox, and thank you for letting me clean it up.
Okay. Hey, listen, it's something to be proud of. Any stats that you can dig up on any of the magazines, there was Record World too, that all matters.
But Record World was not, they were not the lead. They were more the leader in stories about the industry more than their charts. So when you bought Record World, it was about who went to what company, who signed on as GM, etc. That was their power. The power of Cashbox was their charts.
Right.
The power of Billboard was their ability to talk about everything from charts to jukeboxes, because their initial creation was it was a jukebox magazine.
Okay, well, I grew up on American Top 40 with Casey Kasem, and everything was Billboard then. And I bought all the Joel Whitburn books that he put out with all the different charts. So
yeah. But remember something. What years are you talking about with Casey Kasem?
1970, it started, American Top 40.
Well, in the never top 40, he never mentioned Billboard. Not on the air. If you go back to those shows, he never mentioned, he talked about his favorite top 10, but he never said, this is Billboard's favorite top 10.
Okay.
It was his favorite top 10. No, really, Kenneth, it's important. Why it's important? Because the history of things gets boggled if it's not in its right perspective. You're a big Beatles fan. You know how important Paul McCartney, John, Ringo, George took the truth of an article or took the truth of a time period, because many times it gets distorted. And it's just kind of like Not a big deal. It's not a big deal, but just like get it, let the industry get it right. So there's a protection mechanism that automatically comes out of a performer because so much misinformation is out there.
Right.
I'll give you an example. You're a Beatle fan. I'm a Beatle fan. I met the Beatles in 1962. Okay. And so you, as big a Beatle fan you are, you didn't even know that the Beatles covered a Tony Orlando record. And it was in the BBC album.
Right.
Yeah. And so there it is. They took the time, the Beatles did, and their people, to write how they found the song, who they got the song from, when they found it, what year they found it. It was that important to them. So therefore, it should be that important to me.
Okay. Well,
Am I right?
correct. Do you want to talk about the song now?
Sure. I'll
Okay.
talk about anything. I have no, whatever you want to talk about, anything.
Okay. Well, first let's just clear this up because the song we're talking about is "Beautiful Dreamer," and it's a Stephen Foster song, actually, from the mid 1800s.
It's a PD song.
Right.
It's a public domain song.
Right.
So therefore, it is a song he wrote, but there have been many versions of it because it's legal. Once a song is public domain, you can write any lyric to it. So it was written by Carole Kin's husband, Jerry Goffin. The lyric to "The Beautiful Dreamer" that you are talking about, that the Beatles covered, was written by Jack Keller and Jerry Goffin. Jack Keller, who had a lot of hit records, is a melody writer. So he wrote the bridge that you hear on the Beatle record and on my record. And Jerry wrote the lyric. Now, for those of you out there who may not know Jerry Goffin is one of the premier lyricists of the century, without a doubt.
Yes.
20th century, and in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he wrote all of Carole King's Tapestry, all the songs that she ever wrote for the Drifters, which I did the demo for, by the way. So all of the songs like "Up on the Roof," Take Good Care of My Baby, Bobby V, all those songs were written by Jerry Goffin and Carole King. "Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?" And they were adored by the Beatles in the early 60s. When I went to England in 61, and the songwriters they talked most about in all of the papers in England and the Beatles themselves was Thomas and Schumann, Lieber and Stoller, Goffin and King. So that song that you say is PD was actually written lyrically by a premier lyricist by the name of Jerry Goffin. So, and the guy who produced my version of it was Lou Adler. Now, tell the people who Lou Adler is.
Great producer. He produced Tapestry.
Correct.
I know he produced Cheech and Chong.
That's right. You know your history. And he was a powerhouse in his day.
Yeah.
He came to me when I was with Carol and Jerry and Don Kirshner in those days. He says, "I want to cut Beautiful Dreamer with you." I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "Can you do me a favor and do a little bit of a soulful side to it? More like, give me a wow, give me a scream, a Ray Charles scream in it, and do a little bit more R&B. I said, "Sure, what do you want to do?" But I was used to working with those guys because I did the Beatles, I did demos for Carol, etc. So he takes me in the studio and cuts it. Well, the record comes out in 1962. So according to the BBC thing that the Beatles did, George Harrison would very often come to see his sister. I think it was in Missouri, St. Louis or something, right?
63 he did.
Yeah, and he would listen on the radio to songs that he'd love and come back and say, "Let's do this in our live act." So the Beatles heard my version of Beautiful Dreamer, then brought it back. And if you look, there's a wonderful handwritten set list by Paul that came out in Rolling Stone. And it's in that article on BBC, by the way. Yeah. And there he is writing out this set list. And song number 5 was Beautiful Dreamer. So they got a copy of it before it was even released in England because George was here a year before.
Hmm.
So that's how they ended up with it. And it's the funniest thing because I saw John Lennon at a Grammy Awards that he walked on stage with Paul Simon. Maybe you remember
Right.
that.
Remember that? Yep.
And he's walking towards me at the Grammy Awards, and I could see Kenneth. He had an Elvis diamond Elvis pin in his lapel. That's all I kept seeing was this thing. I said Elvis on his lapel, and he's coming out with this big eyes, this big smile on his face. Now I recorded a hit record in England called "Bless You." It went to #1 in 1962.
Right.
So he walks up to me, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "Tony." And I do a terrible imitation of John because, "Tony, you know, we thought Bless You was funky." And he starts laughing, and I start laughing. I said, "Yeah, we forget what we didn't know what funky was back then, man. But thanks for thinking that it was funky from the Beatles' point of view." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what was funky was Beautiful Dreamer." And he gave me a big hug, and that was the last time I saw John.
Now, could you just clarify? Because she said, well, Stephen Foster originally wrote it. So what did Jerry Goffin do with the lyrics? Did he write all his own, or did he
Yeah,
some of what Stephen?
it's all brand new lyric on that.
Okay, and the melody was the same.
Same. But you can do that with any PD song.
Right. Okay.
Once a song hits, like you take a song, a Christmas song. Let's take something like, I don't know, Silent Night.
Right.
You can write a new lyric to Silent Night if you have the guts to do it.
Hmm.
Well, Beautiful Dreamer, the version that the Beatles and I recorded, was redone lyrically by Jerry Goffin.
Hmm.
I used to dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair. Some of it was his, and some of it was Jerry. So he kind of mixed it together. And you can do that with any PD song. You take public domain, once it's public domain means it no longer belongs to your family.
Right.
It runs out, the publishing runs out, becomes the public's song. That's what public domain actually means.
And then what did Jack Keller do?
Jack Keller changed the melody in the bridge.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I want to talk about the beginning of your career because the fact that you were part of the Brill Building, that alone, that's a show to itself. I mean, you must have known all the great songwriters, like you mentioned, Carole King, Jerry Goffin, Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil, who wrote Bless You, right?
They wrote, Barry and Cynthia wrote Bless You.
Yeah.
Carol and Jerry wrote Halfway to Paradise.
Right. And also you probably knew Neil Sedaka.
We were all in the same office.
Huh? What was that like being in that environment? I
Well,
mean,
you know, one of the things that, here I go again, clearing things up. You're going to be mad at me, Ken.
I can't be mad at you.
So here's the thing. We were never in the Brill Building. Carol wasn't in the Brill Building. Neil wasn't in the Brill Building. Neil Diamond wasn't in the Brill Building. Carole King wasn't in the Brill Building. I wasn't in the Brill Building, but everybody says we were in the Brill Building. Now, let me explain why and how that happened. So watch my hand. This is the Brill Building. It's on 49th Street and Broadway. Classic. In that building was a team, the fathers of rock and roll, Lieber and Stoller. Okay? But the rest of the writers in that building were from another era. They were the older guys that wrote songs, Cole Porter, that wrote songs from the 40s. Okay. That was the building. On the top floor of the building was a publishing company called Hill and Range Music, which was Elvis Presley music. So the only two people in the Brill Building that really served up to top 40 hits at that time in the 60s was Lieber and Stoller, Jeff Barry, Ellie Greenwich, and Hill and Range. Now walk across the street, there's a building on this corner. It's on 52nd Street. Here's the Brill Building, and here's 1650 Broadway. Has no name, just 1650 Broadway. Everybody was in that building. And if you went to the 6th floor, room 601 of 1650 Broadway, you walk into a place called Alden Music, which was owned by Don Kirshner and Al Nevins. In that office, there were cubicles, little tiny cubicles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. In this cubicle was a songwriting team called Jerry Goffin and Carole King. In this one was Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil. In this one, it was the Jack Keller, who was the guy who taught all of us how to make records.
Mhm.
In this one, prior to my getting there, was two guys named Tom and Jerry. They didn't make it until they changed the name to Simon and Garfunkel. And this cubicle was a guy named Bobby Darin, who at that time was a super duper star. In this cubicle next to him was a girl named Connie Francis, who at that time was the queen of song. And then in the main office, then there was Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil. Then in the main office was a giant of a guy at 26 years old named Don Kirshner,
Mhm.
and his partner Al Nevins. That's how you get the name of Alden, Aldon Music. Al Nevins, Don Kirshner. They were the entrepreneurs of our music business. They did things that I don't think, maybe they have gotten credit for it, but for instance, independent production came when they had Neil Sedaka signed with RCA Victor. His first hit was called The Diary.
Right.
That was the first time in record company history that a major record company let an outside producer that wasn't part of the house
Mhm.
in. You know, that opened the door for everybody, every record producer from Phil Spector on across the board to make records for major labels. So Don Kirshner, at 26 years old, had these genius songwriters all working in a room, writing songs like You've Lost That Love and Feeling, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, hit after hit, Locomotion, all these hits that even Grand Funk Railroad covered later on, many years later. But they wrote all these incredible songs. Carol, of course, Tapestry album, You Made Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, came out of those little cubicles on the 6th floor, not of the Brill Building, but of 1650 Broadway.
Okay. But it's fair to call them Brill Building writers, right? Even though they weren't.
No, they were not Brill Building writers. Brill Building writers was people in the Brill Building.
Okay.
But what happened was it crossed over because writers who wrote about Tin Pan Alley or that area of town where all the music was coming from, they just said the Brill Building because that was where Lieber and Stoller were, and they were the fathers of rock and roll. But everybody else other than them, and if you read most of the books that Carol is in or I'm in, we correct that because not for any other reason than to say, no, there was another building that was a source of creativity that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
When you think of what came out of 1650 Broadway is unbelievable on that 6th floor. And then when I worked for Clive Davis and I started working for him when the Beatles took over and I had no way of making a living, and I went to work for Clive, and I became general manager of CBS Music Publishing Companies, and then eventually vice president. My office was on the 2nd floor of 1650 Broadway, which was originally Irving Berlin's office.
Huh.
How crazy is that, right? What a crossover, yeah. So those writers were not Brill Building writers. James Taylor did not come from the Brill Building. James came from 1650 Broadway.
Okay. But to be in the company of all these incredible songwriters, and you were a songwriter too, did they teach you anything as far as songwriting is concerned? Or what was the atmosphere like? Was there a lot of competition between everybody?
Yes, friendly competition, inspiring competition. There wasn't an enemy among us all. We never talked bad about each other to this day. You know, I hosted the celebration of life's funeral for Cynthia Weil just recently.
Yeah.
I can't tell you who was there. You name them, they were there. You can well imagine what a writer she was. Incredible.
Right.
And I'm standing there looking out at all these people, and I realized, I told Jeff Barry, I said, Jeff, I know you 62 years. And we've never had a bump in the road. I know Barry Mann 62 years. And I never had a bad word with him, not even this big. I've known Carole King since I'm 16 and she was 18. I'm 79 years old. And we hug and embrace each other as though we came out of some college as kids and there's a college reunion. It's really an amazingly beautiful story that those kind of, I remember sitting with Paul Simon and Paul turned to me and I saw him hugging Carole at Jerry Goffin's funeral. I said, how long do you know Carole? He listened to this. Paul Simon says, I drove Carole to high school. Paul Simon was driving Carole King to school. This is insane, right? How wonderful a community of friends who were, by the way, I stopped writing songs because I was in the presence. I was smart enough to know I was in the presence of real songwriters. I was in the presence of geniuses. You know, when I would talk to Paul McCartney, he would talk about Carole King, Jerry Goffin, Barry Mann. He would even talk about who played drums on my session. He would say, was that Gary Chester on that session? He knew the guitar player was Charlie Macy. He knew that the drummer was Gary Chester. It's incredible how the British knew every musician when in this country, most people only knew what was in 16 magazine, not in a business magazine. I remember coming back, my first trip saying to Donnie, something's going on in England. This was 1962. I said, what was that? Why? I said, Donnie Kirshner, they don't read teen magazines. They're reading industry magazines. They want to know who wrote it. They want to know who played on it. It was a different point of view. But remember, England is the size of New York State. Little tiny place compared to 3,000 miles of America.
Right.
So the focus in that little country of England was on the creative aspect of making records, not on the teenage, let me take a piece of his hair aspect of that star.
Right. I know that John and Paul said they wanted to be the next Goffin and King.
Yeah.
Just the mere fact that they...
In fact, I even cut a Goffin and King record, which was Chains.
Right. And Keep Your Hands Off My Baby.
Keep Your Hands Off My Baby, yeah.
On BBC Radio, too.
Yeah.
So they were very much aware. It tells you how much they were absorbing all this information about the music that was coming out.
I share a story with you I've never shared before. Forgive me if I'm talking too much, but I love your history. I love that you love the history of things. And you love the Beatles because I'm a big Beatle fan myself, you know. We all are. But the first time I met Carole King, she hadn't had a hit yet.
Right.
Don Kirshner said, I'm signing you to a contract that I want you to work with two people I just signed as writers. I want you to go to their house on Brown Street in Brooklyn and sit with them, learn how to do their demos, learn how to sing in a microphone. And he calls in the secretary and says, ask Carole and Jerry to come in here. And Carole King and Jerry Goffin walk into the office. And Donnie says, this is Tony Orlando. I just signed him to a contract. I think we're going to have an album on Epic Records with him. And I'm looking for songs. I think that song you wrote yesterday would be great for Tony. Would you sit down and play it for him? And Carole sits down and she plays me, never recorded yet, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? So I'm hearing Carole King play me a song that I think I'm going to record called Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? And it's blowing my mind. And Jack Keller, who was in the office, now remember, Jack was a writer, but he was the guy, kind of the office professor that we all listened to. And Jack says to Donnie, Tony can't cut that song. And Donnie looks and says, why not? And Carole says, what? Why? Tony sounded good. I sat down and tried to sing a little bit of it with him. He sounded great on this. Jack says, it's a girl song. And Donnie said, what? Listen,
Hmm.
tonight with words unspoken, you say that I'm the only one. But will my heart be broken when the night meets the morning sun? Is this a lasting treasure or just a moment's pleasure? Can I believe the magic of your sighs? Will you still love me tomorrow? No 16-year-old boy says that to a girl.
He's right.
And you want it, he was right. What's crazy is if you look at the history of that song, it was never again a hit by a male. It was a hit by the Shirelles, and there were some great records like the Bee Gees record of what used to say unbelievable, but it wasn't a hit. And the reason
The Four Seasons did it.
Frankie Valli did,
Okay.
yeah, and he did, and it wasn't a hit. It came out of an album. He recorded an album, but it wasn't a hit. He recorded his favorite 60 songs,
Hmm.
but it was never a hit. So no male has ever had a hit with Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow. So Jack was right. You know, and I was with Frankie last night here in Vegas.
Hmm.
And I tell him, I said, the two records that I love, other than the Shirelles record, was your record and the Bee Gees record. He says, but Tony, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow is in your album when you were 16. But that was the session I did thinking it was going to be my first record. Crazy, right, kid?
I just saw Frankie in concert at Mohegan Sun. So yeah, 89 and he still got it.
Who's that?
Frankie Valli.
Oh, Frankie was. I watched him last night here at the Westgate in Vegas, and I said to him, "Why don't you do some of your hits?" I said, I walked out here and I heard 2 hours of hits, every one number one after the other. You tell me, do you think he's had as many number one records as anybody, including the Beatles? He come pretty close.
Well, I'm thinking Billboard. That's how my mind works.
Think Billboard.
You know, so you got Sherry, Big Girls Don't Cry, Walk Like a Man, Ragdoll.
Now, how do you know they were number one in Billboard?
Because I memorized this stuff.
Well, how do you know? Did you see it? Have you ever asked Billboard if any of those songs did not make it to number one in Billboard? Because it's possible that 60s, it could have got to number 3 or number 2 in Billboard and then number 1 in Cashbox. And so all these years later, we all think it's, when we say number 1, it's Billboard. And I love Billboard. I'm not putting it down, but you got to put in perspective the time period. In 60s, Billboard's number 1s didn't mean anything to most writers and performers and producers. Number 1 in Cashbox, you were making it.
Okay, well,
As the years go on, I know, for instance, I had number 1 records in Cashbox and number 2 records in Billboard. Like, for instance, Cupid was number 1, my covering of number 1 in Cashbox, and it sold 3 million records, but it wasn't number 1 in Billboard.
that's interesting. But because of the fact that I've been studying this stuff and I have the Joel Whitburn books and they all list all the artists and where the songs peaked and how many weeks it was.
But you're talking to a professor now. I was there. You weren't.
Okay.
Am I right?
Okay.
But am I right? You weren't there, right?
I know. I was a little
That's
kid.
the difference. The difference to make it right is, were you there?
Hmm.
So you thought all of us were from Brill Building all these years, but we weren't. We were across the street. And just so you know, there was no Brill Building for Carole King or Barry Mann or me or Neil Sedaka or any of us or James Taylor even. When I had James Taylor at CBS Music, April Blackwood Music, I was representing his music at the time. He wasn't in the Brill Building. His music was in 1650. Same with Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I represented them. Same with Barry Manilow. I signed Barry Manilow and produced his first records for Bell.
Didn't you write with him?
Pardon me?
Didn't you write songs with Barry?
I wrote Could It Be Magic with Barry, yeah.
Wow. That's a great song there.
Thanks. and produced the first record of it. The first record came out in '71. Could be Magic. Yeah.
Okay. So this is before Ron Dante worked with him.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years before Ron Dante. And by the way, I signed Ron Dante. I brought Ron Dante to Don Kirshner when I was 16 years old. And we wrote a song together called Mr. Tear when we were just kids.
You probably knew everybody in the business, I think.
I've been lucky. And Ron Dante, like the rest of them, are my friends. Never a bump in the road. And he deserves all the credit for what he did. Him and Clyde made Barry Manilow a star, not Tony Orlando. I discovered Barry. I got him signed to Bell, which became Arista, but they made him the star, not me.
Well, I just tell you, I have enormous respect for all these songwriters that you're talking about.
Me too.
Every time, the education never ends. You're always going to find some song that you didn't know was a Goffin and King song. You know, it's same thing with Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil and Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield and those people. So it's
you know what I'm going to do with you, Ken? This is going to be something you're going to treasure, really. Because you love the industry so much and you want everything to be right. And I love you for that. I do. I love and respect you for it. I'm going to send you the demos sung by Barry Mann of all of his hits. Your jaw will drop to your chest. You will say, Tony, they equal to the performances of the stars that recorded them. And in some cases, even better.
I know I've heard Here You Come Again.
Yeah. And you know who that was written for originally?
No.
Tony Orlando and Dawn.
Didn't know. That's amazing.
And Mike Medris, my producer, turned it down.
They don't always make the best decisions, but actually, would you say that's more a woman's song? Because of Dolly?
What?
Would you say that's more a woman's song?
Which one?
Here You Come Again. Because, you know.
Yes.
So maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why. Because Hank had great ears. So maybe that's why. You're right. Very right. That's a righteous thing to say. Yes. You know, Barry, his performance on Just Once, the demo.
Yeah.
You're going to go, what? What? If Barry Mann ever had the hits with the songs he wrote, if I don't know much, but I know I love you. You've Lost That Love and Feeling, Just Once. If you took up Barry's songs and listened to the demos of those songs, you would say if he had the hits with his own songs, he'd have been one of the greatest singers-songwriters of all time. Because when you listen to these demos, you're going to go, in fact, you can go to YouTube. Go to YouTube, go Barry Mann, and listen to the whole list of songs. It's on YouTube.
Yep.
He wrote, and he sings on. You will not believe it.
Why didn't he pursue that then, to be more the singer? I mean, I know
he and I have no idea. When I asked Barry that, he said, Tone, all I know is I would sing it for Quincy, and the next thing I know, it's out by somebody else. And I wasn't going to fight it because I knew Quincy was a genius and he's going in the, to cut Just Once. I'm not going to mess with him. Yeah. And that was what was happening with Barry, except for one song. His first and only hit as an artist, which was Who Put the Bump in the Bump Bumper.
Right.
Which he wrote with Jerry Goffin, by the way, not Cynthia Weil.
Well, I love studying this stuff, who wrote certain hits and I want to talk very much about, because I'm someone that looks at songwriters credits all the time. And when you talk about your hits of the 70s, there are two names that leap out at you. Erwin Levine and L. Gordon Brown. I mean, from Candida, who I also know Tony Wine helped to write, but, going through Knock V Times, Tie Yellow Ribbon, Gypsy Rose, those two cranked it out for you. I mean, they were a
Cranked it.
gold mine for you. How did you get to know them? How did they become part of?
All through Hank Medris, the producer. One of the things I did when I left, remember when I left Clive Davis, I was vice president of two of CBS's music publishing companies. That, for a kid who never went to high school, that was a pretty good position to find myself in. And I did Candida as a favor to Hank Medris, who produced that record.
Right.
I didn't record it. I didn't know it was going to be a hit record. I did it as a favor to someone who needed $3,000 to pay his bills. So when Hank came to me, here I am, vice president working with Clive. He says, I'm broke. You got to do me a favor. Can you try and sell this master for me? Of a song called Candida. Now, the master that he played me was the record that you heard, except not my voice. It was another singer. So I said, you know, Hank, I think that's a hit record. Now, remember, when I was working with Clive, my attitude was more towards albums than it was towards singles. So I had James Taylor, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, more in the world was going more for albums than a singles-oriented company.
Right.
I had Laura Nero, all these great writers and great albums to protect and help make happen. So singles, I go to Bell Records, which was a singles-oriented company with Hank's record of Candida. And I called Larry Utah and I said, Larry, I think I got a hit record for you. I said, I don't own it. It's owned by Hank Medris of the Tokens. You remember the Tokens? Lion said, yeah. Let me bring it over to you. And he wants $3,000 for their master. Okay, send it over. I go over and I take it myself and I play it for my buddy.
Yeah.
To Larry Utah. And Larry goes, you know, Tone, this is a hit record, man. I'm not crazy about the lead voice. Tell Hank if he gets a different lead voice on it. I want to hear something more like a drifter's voice, more like a Benny King. Okay. So I go back and I said, Hank, and I give him that news. So go find somebody. He goes, wait a minute. Didn't you do demos for Carole King, for Benny King? I said, yeah. He said, Tony, put your voice on it. I said, Hank, I can't do that. I got a job here. That's like moonlighting. I can't do that. Tony, I'm broke. Please. I know you could do, I promise. I won't use your name. I'll come up with some other name. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do, Hank. I leave here at 7 o'clock. I'll go over to Olmsted Studios. If we get this done in an hour, it's yours. If we don't, I got to go. But no name. Do not put Tony Orlando on this record. Get your $3,000, pay your bills, and give me a hug. So I go in the studio. Ken, this is how we cut Candida. Now, you know what the word cell sync means?
No.
Okay. So cell sync in those days meant that you could sing a line, stop the tape. What's the next line? And they'll play the beginning of what you just recorded. You catch up to it and start again. That's called cell syncing. Cell syncing. Okay. Hank, what's the first line? Stars won't come out if they know that you're about. Hang on. Stars won't come out if they know that you're about. Okay, play the intro. Stars. And I hear da 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 2 3 4 1 2 3. Stars won't come out if they know that you're about. What's the next line? 'Cause they couldn't match the glow of your eyes. 'Cause they couldn't match the glow. I think I got it. Okay, go ahead. Play it. I hear myself. Stars won't come out if they know that you're about. I come in. 'Cause they couldn't match the glow of your eyes. That's how we cut that song, one line at a time. I learned it on the spot We finished the record at 8 o'clock to the dime. I leave, I go, hope you get your 3,000. I leave, and he gets his 3,000. 3 months later, my secretary comes in, Cheryl Feuerstein. She goes, Tony, Candida is the hottest record coming up on the charts. It's like 32 with a bullet in Billboard the first week. That means it's going to #1. I said, what? The song you did with Hank. I said, what name did he use? He said, you used the name Dawn. Dawn? Yeah. I called up Hank. I said, Hank, Cheryl tells me this is a hit. Oh, yeah, Tony, you're not going to believe it. My God, it's a big hit. This guy's a smash. Oh, my God, thank you, thank you, thank you. So wait a minute. Who and what is Dawn? I'm glad you didn't use my name, but why Dawn? He said, Tony, Steve Wax was the #1 promotion man at Bell Records. His daughter's name is Dawn. I figured if I would use her name, he would be happy to really work it even more so.
Right.
And that's how the name Dawn came about. Okay, so we cut this song. Then he comes back to me with a second song that was written by the two boys you just mentioned. First Candida was cut by Tony Wine and Erwin Levine. By the way, Tony Wine, I also brought to Donnie Kirshner when she was 14 years old, like I did with Ronnie Dante.
Yeah. You could also say, as you point out in your shows with Tony Wine, that she's that voice that you hear on Sugar Sugar.
Absolutely. And many, many hit records. Bad Boy Leroy Brown, Sweet Caroline. That was Tony Wine and Linda November on all those records. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now I'm not going to let Clive know that Candida is #1 and lose my job. I moonlighted. He'll never know. It's done, right? I have no deal. I'm not making any money. The record's #1 in the world. Candida comes into me and he goes, Hank does, Tony, please listen to this song, Knock 3 times. Come on, man, put your voice on. I said, Hank, please, I'm going to lose my job. I can't do this. Hank, please, just this one time. I promise I won't ask again. I promise. So I hear, knock 3 times on this scene. I said, Hank, there are no pipes to knock twice on in the Midwest. This song will only be a hit in Brooklyn. It will not be a hit in Des Moines. They don't have tenement buildings in Des Moines. Okay, I'll go in and do it for you because it's going to bomb this record. 4 million records later. So now, between Candida, 2 million records, Knock 3 times, 4 million records, 6 million records as DAWN. I go home and I said, what am I doing? I've dreamed all my life to be a performer. I got 2 #1 records in a row. One of them has sold 4 million records around the world. I go to Clive Davis and I said, Clive, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of the company. I have to leave. He goes, why? Because you're Dawn? I said, wait a minute. You know I'm Dawn? He goes, everybody knows you're Dawn. Everybody. It's the worst kept secret in the record business. Of course I knew. And you never said anything? No. I said, why? He said, because I expect 6 April Blackwood CBS songs to be in that album. Well, so when you look at that album, you'll, in my mind, I'm going to Carolina by James Taylor. Rainy Day Man by James Taylor in the album. That's all because I owed it to Clive to leave. So I go out and I create Dawn. And how do I create Dawn? While I'm cutting Barry Manilow, I hired background singers that were Hot Buttered Soul, Isaac Hayes, girls. In that group was a girl named Thelma Hopkins. She was gorgeous and still is to this day. I said, Thelma, you know there's record Candida and Knock Three Times? Yeah, I said, that's me. I want to start a group called Dawn. You want to go with me? Because you've done every background hit. You've hit all the Four Tops records. You were on that. You were on Hurry Through the Grapevine with Marvin Gaye. You were on Shaft with Isaac Hayes. You're the one that said, shut your mouth to Isaac Hayes. Would you like to just come with me and be on the road with me? And with one of the girls, she goes, well, I want to bring my cousin Joyce. I said, oh, okay, you got a deal. Well, where we go? I said, we're going to England. I'm in. I've never been to England. I want to go. And that's how I found Dawn. And we went to England, and the rest was history. We never left each other's side. And as I retire, this right now, as I'm talking to you, this coming weekend here in Las Vegas, after headlining in Vegas for 52 years, this will be my last show in Las Vegas at the South Point Hotel. 52 years I've headlined in this town. It's a pretty good run.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Thelma and Joyce are coming to the show.
Oh, nice.
Nice. And then my last show that I'll ever do on the road after 63 years in this business will be at the Mohegan Sun, my favorite venue, my favorite person in Tom Cantone to work in all these years. That's where I'm closing it out.
Well, I've seen you at Mohegan several times and always enjoyed the show.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask you, because the purpose really for doing this interview, of course, I'd love to talk about any aspect of your career, is to let everybody know that this is your last tour. But as someone who I know loves performing, why now?
Why not? 60, I would have been happy with 63 weeks in show business.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a reality now. And I think I can't speak for Elton John, and I can't speak for the Oak Ridge Boys, and I can't speak for Kenny Loggins, but I think the reason for it is similar to mine. Candy and Knock Three Times is 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
53 years ago. There is a dwindling of an audience because just by mere age group, I'm still selling out, but I don't want to ever be in a position to walk out to 4 rows filled.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that feeling. I don't want to have to go out and push and look like I'm having to be out there rather than enjoying to be out there.
Right.
And the other reason, and the main reason, and this is the main reason, is that when you're 79, traveling today becomes very toxic. Why? Because really, when you fly today, there's no nonstops to speak of. There's all connections. There's delays. There's cancellations. So every time we go on the road, there's a 12-hour trip. And then you're told the pilots are tired. They can't fly tonight, so you got to check into a hotel till tomorrow. That kind of gets to you after a while. It's toxic. It's tiring to the body. It's tiring to my band. My drummer's been with me for 42 years, just like Frankie Valli's. Robbie Robinson's been with him for 46 years as a musical director. We have our family, and our family, they're getting up there too. And that kind of road travel didn't exist when we were kids. And if it did, we were kids. We didn't care. But when you get up into your late 70s, and you're talking about a 5-hour delay, and you're sitting in Des Moines, Iowa, and then they tell you the plane is canceled, and it's commonplace.
Right.
Like going, you know what? It's not worth it to the bodies of the guys in the band. The overhead to fly today is ridiculous. The cost of rooms to put guys in is ridiculous. You've got to make sure that you give a proper salary to cover their life in a time when everything has exploded in terms of income. So when you look at the whole tapestry of what it is to be a performer at 79 years old, and the last time you had a hit record was in 1977, it's time to say, be smart, do other things. Let your creative juices work up elsewhere.
Right.
So I start Explosive Film and Entertainment Company now. I'm going to try my luck because I've always wanted to write for films. I've also wanted to write a Broadway show. I also want to write a new book. I also want to write a novel. There's a lot to me that I want to do that I've ignored. And so just for the pure excitement of being able to do all this new stuff, it's like, yes, this is fun now. Instead of going, what time do we leave? We're delayed what? How many hours?
See, I got to tell you, I can go on, a rant about demand for an artist as they get older, because having been in radio for a very long time, I know that it's a very youth-oriented industry. And I happen to believe, people who program radio, and there are people who question whether radio is as important as it used to be. I still say it is, because you're on the radio.
Oh, I love my radio show.
Yeah.
I look, I'm very lucky. I'm with a guy at WABC in New York.
Mm.
And we stream to 173 countries. It's different now.
Right.
And New York is the #1 market in the world, and I'm on a historical radio station with WABC.
Tell me about it.
Question. And the numbers that we're getting is amazing. What really amazes me is how young the audiences are. We're hitting demographics of 35, 36-year-olds. And that amazes me. But I am lucky, and you'll understand this. I don't have a program director telling me what to do. They let me go. So I sit and create shows, concepts, themes. Sometimes it's a radio audio biographic show about one person.
Right.
Sometimes it's I had Paul Stanley on the other night. I've had Adam Sandler on. I've had Lionel Richie on. I've had Garth Brooks and Trish on. I've had Clive Davis on for 4 hours. Wow. I've had Clive on for 4 hours. And it was unbelievable. David Foster, I had him on for 4 hours also, 2 shows. So they allow me to fly. Now, if I was working for a radio station with a guy who says, you can't do that because our demographic says, I wouldn't be able to be that. I couldn't do radio.
But you're also saying that your audience is aging, and yet on your radio station, you've got young people listening.
Because they're discovering me and not paying for a ticket. There's a difference turning on your radio for free and turning and going to your wallet to go see somebody perform.
But then they can discover your music from listening to the radio now. These younger people, then want to see you live.
But they're not coming. And if you ask most performers, Garth Brooks, of all people, stadiums, said my audiences are dwindling. I can't do stadiums anymore. So he's doing a show here in Vegas at the Wynn. It's at 1,600 people. There's a reality in time when your audience demographic is important. Also, another thing that's happened to me on Broadway and a lot of our shows, because of the pandemic, that age group that goes with us, they want to go out. They don't want to catch the flu. They don't want to catch a pandemic. They don't want to walk out and get beat over the head in front of a theater on Broadway. And that's why Broadway tickets have tanked because of the crime in the city. 400,000 people who normally would go to Broadway have moved out of New York City to Florida or to Nashville or South Carolina. So you're losing the base, the hunk of who you are. So you as a performer have to make an adjustment. Now, if I was selling out, I sell out still, but if I was selling out every show, everywhere I go, and I didn't see a little bit of a dwindling of it, I wouldn't leave. But it's getting to the point where you have to be realistic. Do I continue coming home with no money because the overhead is so incredible?
Right.
Do I do that to my family? Would you do it? No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
The only thing I could say to that is, having just seen Frankie Valli at Mohegan Sun, that was a near sellout in the arena. And I also saw Paul Anka there, near sellout. So
Me too. I'm sold out too. But Frankie Valli is about to retire. He's 90. No reason for him to be out there. Come on, he's 90 years old.
I know that. He says he still loves
Give the
it.
guy a break. Let's
Yeah.
give him a break. Come on, please. He deserves to have a good time with his new wife and stay home. I tell him that, but he wants to be out there. I don't have that.
Hmm.
I don't have that fire in my gut.
Hmm.
I don't have that to fight what it takes to get there anymore. I just don't. I want to be. I want to be inspired. I want to be. I'll go out and do one-on-one talk situations with my audience, but I'm not. It's not. It's not in my. I just don't have it anymore to do that. I've done it since I'm 16. I'm 79.
Right.
Enough is enough. Let some young performer enjoy this time at the Mohegan Sun Arena. Remember, I started working the Mohegan Sun, my favorite venue, in 1999. There wasn't even a hotel there yet.
Hmm. I've seen many shows at Mohegan Sun. My
Love
wife
that.
and I probably, we must be in first place for the most free shows in the Wolf Den. And then the arena, we've seen a lot of shows.
I worked the Wolf Den too.
What's that?
I worked the Wolf Den as well.
Yeah, I know. I've seen you
I
there.
worked the Cabaret as well. I opened the Cabaret. Tony Bennett and I opened the Cabaret.
Yeah.
Then when Tom came in from Foxwoods, he's the one that put me into the arena. Tom Cantone is a genius. I know Tom Cantone since Atlantic City days,
Right.
Ken. And if you ever read his book,
I haven't.
it should be mandatory in every college,
Hmm.
Tom Cantone's book about buying acts for casino venues. It's unbelievable. Do yourself a favor and ask Tom to give it to you.
I will.
It's unbelievable. It's truly a lesson. It's a professor's lesson on exactly what we're talking about. When is the time? I love show business. It's been my life since I'm 13. That's all I know. But I would have been happy pulling a curtain at a theater.
Uh-huh.
I would have been happy getting Frankie Valli sandwiches as long as I was in show business, like Joe Pesci used to do. For him. Joe Pesci was his runner when he was the Four Seasons started out. He was the kid that went out and got them the sandwiches, Joe Pesci. I mean, I would have been happy with that job with the Four Seasons.
Sure.
I love this business, but the body gets tired with what's the way you travel today. It's unbelievable what it takes to get out there today. And you come home as you get older in the business, your income lessens. When your income lessens, your overhead doesn't. When your overhead overpowers you and you're not making any money to speak of, anything to speak of from live dates, other than that you love going out to perform, it becomes not a good thing for the band, not a good thing for the family, not a good thing for your health.
Right.
So you got to be a grown up at some point and say, now is not the time to do this. Now is the time to stir my excitement with a new journey. And by the way, the new journey is still serving my audience. Because if I write a motion picture that they love, I'm still serving them. Because ultimately, they are my boss. Ultimately, they are the ones I care about. Ultimately, the thing I'll miss the most is them. The thing I'll miss the most is a smile on their faces, looking at them from the stage. The thing I'll miss the most is the meet and greets and the hugs, or the guy that walks up to me and says to me, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, Tony, I have 4-stage cancer. And this is the greatest show I ever saw.
Yeah.
You know how many times I've heard that? And let me tell you what happened. Because of my work with Jerry Lewis on the telethon, I say this to them, and I say it if it's true. I look in their eye, and I can see when the light's on. And I say to that guy with 4-stage cancer, I got news for you. The light is still on. Live your life. to its fullest.
Mhm.
I can tell when the light goes out. The light's not out yet. Be confident. You might be able to beat this. What if I told you, Ken, and this is the God's truth, I'll have a guy come back, not all of them, but many of them, over 63 years of show business, come back and say, Tony, remember me? I'm the guy with the 4-stage cancer. I beat cancer. Talk about a crying hug. You're talking about being worth being in show business, being worth it.
That's something you can't even. I mean, it's so emotional to think of something like that, the effect that you can have on someone else, and
Absolutely.
makes it so worthwhile just to know that you're appreciated in any way, but then to be able to help you with such a horrible sickness, you know?
Look at the 33 years I spent with Jerry Lewis
Yeah.
on the MDA telethon. 33 years I co-hosted that with him.
Hmm.
And you know, my sister was cerebral palsy, and she had such brain damage that she had an 8-month-old IQ until she died at 21. And that was my first audience.
Hmm.
I used to be able to sit down with my guitar and sing Runaway, Del Shannon, to my sister. And that would literally prevent a seizure. Or when I would look at my sister's, she get, you know how you know when you're a father, the difference between a tired cry, a hunger cry from your child. In my case, I could recognize an itch cry, which meant I had to find that itch to scratch it, because if I didn't, it was so annoying to her, she would seizure. So I panic and I start scratching all over it. And she'd go, And I realized my sister, an IQ of an 8-month-old baby, taught me the importance of being able to scratch my own itch. And that's where Tony Orlando says to an audience, hey, you guys, put your hands in. Come on, clap with me. Come on, let's go.
Right.
Sing with me. And if a guy comes backstage and says to me, you know what, Tony, I can't stand that clapping along shit, okay? I just can't handle it. I can't handle it. I mean, it's degrading. I said, really? And I told him about my sister. And I said, at least you're able to feel the sting of the clap of your own hands. My sister couldn't do that. So you clap your hands, buddy, and enjoy the sting that that clap creates.
There's so many little things like that to appreciate that many of us take for granted.
Most important thing to appreciate is the little things.
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk to you about, can you say just a few words about?
Hang on 1 second, everybody. Jen? Do I have another interview coming? At what time?
About now.
Oh, at 3 o'clock?
About now.
Oh, I have an interview at 3 o'clock. Can we call back and continue this?
I'll stop this, and then what time would you like to do?
Let me go. I have a really important interview at 3 o'clock East Coast time. I got to go do it. Forgive me. I'll call you right back. Do you mind?
I'll send you another link.
Got it. Jenny, talk to Kenneth. Forgive me, Kenneth. I didn't know. I talked too much.